the political leader of the NTA on the line with us, Gary Griffith. And I just want to find out a few things from Mr. Griffith and, get his opinion and his thoughts on some things. So good morning, Gary. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
All right. You sure you're fine? Anyhow, let me not talk about Manchester United. That might get
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was bad enough watching our team last night against French Guyana that we couldn't score. I'm ready to make a return to go out and work for trials, yes.
Boy, real pressure, yes? Anyway, now I know yesterday we spoke about one particular topic, but I see a couple others pop up this morning. State of emergency and these MPs being split. What was the headline? MPs divided along party lines when it comes to state of emergency. Faris Al-Rawi is saying that when he was Attorney General, he passed legislation to deal with crime, and the government is headed in the right direction, and it's going to take time, and what is needed now is more boots on the ground and enforcement of the law. Where does the NTA stand in terms of any kind of state of emergency, limited or otherwise?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, on both sides of the political fence, they're totally out of sync with what is happening. But this is what usually happens. Anything that the political leader will say, everybody has to adhere to it. I mean, it even starts with Minister Faris Al-Rawi. I don't know why it is that members of parliament and supporters of both the PNM and UNC, every single comment, it must start with, had it not been for the guidance and the support and the direction and the leadership of our great political leader, why he had to say it had to be under the guidance of the Prime Minister. So you're so dotish, you need the Prime Minister's guidance. You know, when you look at the debates you have in the United States and stuff, you will never hear senators and governors always having to praise the head of the Democrats and the Republicans, but it seems that it's something politicians on both sides, every time the UNC or anybody has a meeting, and it's because of the vision and the greatness and the leadership. They always have to include that to make sure I can keep my work. Having said that, that is exactly what is happening now. So the division is based on what Keith Rowley or Kamala Prasad-Bissessar believes. And in the situation, to clarify also, there's no such thing as a limited state of emergency. Okay. Let me clarify that. You keep hearing it over and over. There is no such thing. It's like saying that you're half pregnant. A state of emergency is something that is done by a proclamation by the president that affects the constitutional rights of all citizens of the country. You can have a state of emergency with no curfew. You can have a state of emergency with curfews in a specific area, like what happened when a prime minister decided to arrest a speaker of the house. And so you can have that, but there's no such thing as a limited state of emergency. Okay. Jamaica, however, they have something that we can consider in the future, if it is that we can't crack it, which is known as a zone of special operations, ZOSO. The zone of special operations give them that degree of authority similar to that of a curfew that gives the authorization for the military to be able to utilize some degree of power and authority that they do not have without a state of emergency. That is what caused the problem in Trinidad and Tobago when we had the Special Anti-Crime Unit of Trinidad and Tobago. Patrick Manning was on track. And that's why when he had the blimp, I changed it to the drone. When he had the SORT, I changed it to SORT. When he had the 2.4 billion OPVs, I was able to get the damning vessels for 1.2 billion less to do the same thing the OPVs could have done. But because of pettiness by this administration, they have refused to use it for 9 years and now it can't work. So that's what Jamaica has. However, again, my personal view of it, based on my limited knowledge and qualification and training in law enforcement, a state of emergency is not a crime-fighting tool. It continues. I remember there was an anti-crime talk and somebody said, every time I hear a gunshot, I say call a state of emergency. Let me show you the repercussions of a state of emergency. When you call a state of emergency, it can affect, it can close businesses, it can cause many people now to become unemployed. It can cause now increase in cost of goods and services. It can cause inflation. It can cause frustration. So there's always a domino effect. It is going to affect investment internationally. So those are the repercussions of a state of emergency, if it is you do that. And again, obviously, it is a stopgap measure. When I was National Security Advisor, the then Prime Minister asked me about it. I was in Space Mountain about to go on my ride in Orlando, and she said, we want to call a state of emergency. I said, well, why? There were 9 murders in 5 days. And this is not to discredit her. There was also the concern of a possible attempt to assassinate political opponents and so forth. So they made the decision. I was against it at the time. But what happened is that the end result is that it was used in the wrong way hundreds of persons who were arrested illegally, unlawfully, because you had a seedy hierarchy of the police service being intimidated by the politicians to do what the politicians wanted. And that is where it is. We have the present situation where we have, again, senior police officers adhering to directions from the politicians, which is what I stood up against when Keith Rowley and when the government tried to do the same thing with myself and trying to get me to arrest persons in their homes because they were ignorant, not understanding public health regulations, which meant that the police could not infringe on your constitutional rights of privacy. So if Stefan decides to have 100 people come in his home for Mother's Day live, there's nothing the police could have done that day during that period of COVID. If it is 5 of them decided to go on the beach, I could arrest them. It was a stupid law. And when you hear this, that doesn't make any sense. I had to, my responsibility was not to make sense, was to adhere to the law. So when you heard Kamala Prasad-Bissessar speaking stupidness about a 2-tiered police plan during COVID, where you were allowing people to be in their homes, bringing in hundreds of people in a wedding, but if you go in your car with several people, you'll be arrested. That's because Kamala Prasad-Bissessar, quote-unquote SC, didn't read the law. Keith Rowley, likewise, Philip Alexander. You have people who are political leaders or self-proclaimed political leaders who they're so ignorant they don't even understand the law. So in a nutshell, the state of emergency is not a crime-fighting tool. We would have seen what worked in 2013 to 2015 under the People's Partnership, under Kamala Prasad-Bissessar as Prime Minister and Chair of the Council, with myself as Minister. It was the highest reduction in serious crime in 31 years without a state of emergency. Yeah. As Commissioner of Police in my last 18 months, it was the highest reduction in violent crime without a state of emergency. We just need to utilize this technology, the systems, the units that are available worldwide that we use in those periods that were all shut down by a very vindictive administration. And a simple example is the Commission of Inquiry into the attempted coup. When they gave 33 recommendations, I was the only minister out of the last several that looked at it. I implemented 11 out of the 33. One included something that is known as a national alert state, which is similar to what the state of emergency will do. That's all the state of emergency can do of value to reduce crime. Put in heavier police presence, but a national alert state, you lift that alert from green to amber to red to black, based on the escalation and the threat, and it allows now the police to up their game, knowing the number of what they should be done, having the extra input of the Toronto Defence Force. We have 5,000 members of the Defence Force sitting down doing nothing. Yeah. We have 500 members of the Air Guard that for the last several years, they don't even have a chicky chung or a mad bull to fly, far less a helicopter or an aircraft. We have nearly over 1,000 members of the Toronto Coast Guard without a vessel. We have another 2,500 odd members in the Army have all been in camp, waiting on standby since 1990. So for 34 years, we have the Army on standby when those fellas are very highly trained that can provide a support element for the police, similar to what Patrick Manning was thinking of doing under SOT. So there are many things that can be done. It is definitely not what Faris Alwari is stating, oh, we're going to just put pressure and zero tolerance. No, it requires specific training, analyzing the situation and utilizing your limited national security resources in an effective and efficient manner.
Yeah, because, I was about to ask you about the vessels. I want to tie that into a kind of two-part question. Fitzgerald Hines in the paper this morning said that it's going to take 14 months. It's amazing that they actually said this out loud. It's going to take 14 months till the Coast Guard boats are back in operation. Now, I would imagine the way that he stated it, it's that the all 8 vessels will be back up and running within a 14-month period. Now, to start with, these vessels, you have first-hand knowledge of the vessels that in question right now. You mentioned it in your response to the state of emergency question. But in terms, I want you to give us a little, give your take on these vessels being down, 8 vessels at the same time, that 14-month time frame to get them back up and running, what the country's borders are going to be open to, and I also want you to tie that in with Faris Alwari stating that things will not improve immediately. It takes time. In terms of time, from your perspective, as now a political leader, a former commissioner of police, a former minister of national security, but more so a current political leader of a party, how much time is acceptable in order to see a decrease in crime?
Well, again, I mean, you had 9.5 years, going on 10. How much more time you want? You have been weighed, measured, and found wanting. It is undoubtedly the most incompetent government in the history of Trinidad and Tobago's politics. So you want more time? You got 9.5 years, brother. You had your time and you lost it. It's time for you to, the only time that you need to know is time for you to get out. Pack your bags and leave. The government has failed miserably. Going back to the People's Partnership Administration, and again, Kamala Prasad Bisesha, she's no national security expert, but she had the knowledge to understand, look, Gary understands what is required, and she gave me the authority to move and just kick and run and just do what I had to do. Sometimes people are they're affected and sometimes intimidated by the speed in which I get things done. And when I looked at it immediately as I became security minister, I saw the value in what Patrick Manning was trying to do with the OPVs. But the OPVs were designed to secure your exclusive economic zone. You know, they have the PNM till they're dead. I mean, you're going on 15 years later, they shut down the OPV, they cancel the OPV. You ask them what is an OPV, they don't even know, including the politicians. It sounds so stupid. Let me clarify. The OPV are there to secure your exclusive economic zone. They don't even know what that means. That is from 12 to 200 miles out. That is what those vessels were there for. So the OPVs were not designed to secure your borders. So what I had was a three-tiered approach, a maritime wall. From the shoreline to 2 miles out, you will have the police marine branch, which I reignited after decades, which has now been shut down again virtually after I left. Because it was the same Keith Rowley said, make sure you get that for Tobago. I had several vessels for the police marine branch that would have actually gone to Tobago. That is tier 1. They have shut that down. Tier 2 will be from 2 miles to 10 odd miles, and that is where it is. We got vessels such as the Damen vessels that will be able to do patrols between the mainland in South America and Trinidad waters, and then Trinidad and Tobago waters, and then to patrol specific areas around to provide and to minimize the issue of so many illegal immigrants, human trafficking, illegal weapons, drugs, entering the country. I went to Las Cuevas on Sunday, and Venezuelan boats coming and going. We have Venezuelan boats virtually stationed here. They go and fish in Trinidad and Tobago waters to bring it back for us to buy our own fish from them. And they could easily be taking persons in and out, and nobody knows. It is a disaster waiting to happen. So they have failed miserably as it pertains to securing our borders. I drafted the Border Protection Unit for Keith Rowley because I realized the government and the ministers were incompetent, showing what needs to be done. 95% of the illegal guns that enter our borders come through the legitimate ports of entry. I got this confirmed by the US. Right. And that is why it is I to try to piggyback and help this incompetent government, which it was not my responsibility. I got the mobile scanners to be able to pinpoint weapons in vehicles. They shut that down after I left. He refused to implement the Border Protection Unit that I drafted. All of these things I will be able to implement within months, as soon as we get into government. As it pertains to going back to the vessels, so that is where I acquired the Damen vessels. The problem with Patrick Manning is that the OPVs would have been $2.4 billion for 3 OPVs. When I looked, I did research with the government of Colombia, Israel, and Korea. We were getting the exact model OPV for $1.2 billion less. So all the people have, they shut down the OPV. Go down and type BAE/corruption. That is where we were getting the vessels from. You will get 17 countries being kicked back to government officials in corruption. So instead of us losing $1.2 billion in taxpayers' dollars, I did research and I was able to get the Damen vessels, 6 vessels, inclusive of utility vessels, so those same vessels could stay out for weeks and be able to do exactly what the OPVs could have done for $1.2 billion less. Because of mismanagement and pettiness by this administration, they refused to touch those Damen vessels. So those vessels are virtually new. I acquired them in 2015 after doing all the work as Minister of National Security. They refused to use it. Additionally, you must, even if they get these vessels in 14 months, we will still not be able to utilize the vessels. Why? Because you must equate manpower must equate with naval asset acquisition. So in other words, when they had the OPVs, you needed about 80 odd sailors to man an OPV. So which meant for 80 sailors, you need rotation. So you need 80 to come on, 80 to come off. And then you need another 80 because of resettlement training, resignation, death or whatever. So you need at least 240 qualified sailors to man an OPV, which is 720 for 3. Guess how many we sent to train? 80. So 15 years later, had we acquired those OPVs, they would have still been moored in Stobles. And it's the same thing that happened with the Damen vessels. What did I do? We acquired the Chinese vessel that anybody goes down the islands, you will see that vessel there. We got that for next to nothing. It was larger than the OPVs. And that what that would have done is to ensure we do batches of Coast Guard training, 150 recruits at a time, drop them on that vessel and send them out to sea for 2 weeks. You know, we train our sailors to be recruits in Coast Guard and they have no vessel to train. So how you training the person to be a sailor? By them stating and by staying on the jetty and do a 20-meter swim? That is the incompetence of this government. So the Chinese vessel has never been used to assist in training. And this is not Gary Griffith as a naval expert. I sent people as Courtney Lange, Admiral Hayden Pritchard, Commodore Franklin, Admiral Kelshall, qualified experts who assisted me in packaging this maritime security wall that will lock down the borders. What I just stated in the last 5 minutes, neither the PNM or UNC have a clue to understand what I just said or how to implement it. We know what to do because I got to have the right team, the people, the policies to be able to secure our borders. So even though they speak about 14 months, it shows ignorance at the highest level. Additionally, the Diamond vessels, those 6 vessels, each of them have the interceptors. Those interceptors are brand new. They can be dropped down so you won't have to hear the nonsense from Farley Augustine stating to give the sailors a pirogue, the Coast Guard a pirogue. Those interceptors could be used. Had I been in office right now, I would have immediately contacted the US government who were giving me 2 naval vessels similar to the Diamond vessels, similar to be about 20 odd years old. They were giving it to me for free. I would have immediately been contacting the US government and say, listen, we have a situation. It's a clear and present danger. It's going to affect your own citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. Can we get the acquisition of a lease or use of a vessel? I will get that in a month. That is what they were giving to me.
Okay.
So totally, you have to be proactive, not sit back and say, well, in the next 14 months, we will get a vessel. And then when 14 months come, you don't have the manpower to equate with the youth of the asset acquisition.
Yeah, just one little thing on that same issue before we before this actually the final question because we almost out of time. Is it wise to broadcast that publicly that the vessels are down?
Well, you have to be truthful. I mean, everybody, even Stevie Wonder could see that there are no vessels out there. Anybody who has a vessel and goes down the islands, you will see all the vessels are all moored in Stoble's Bay. And it has always been because of this PNM is incompetent, but the height of incompetence in the PNM dictionary is naval asset acquisition. I asked anybody to go to Hartscott. When I went to Perth in Australia, under Austral, I said, why did you all sell us 6 Austral vessels from the Coast Guard that were not compatible to our waters? You know what they said? They said, sir, when the Patrick Manning administration came to Australia, they saw those vessels, they said, we like it, we want it. But they said, okay, if you go by Hartscott, you will see 6 vessels, it's halfway underwater. Those vessels were made for leaks. We spent hundreds of millions of dollars for 6 hostile vessels that were used for about 2 months, and they could not be used after. That is how the incompetence of this government is. We have the Diamond vessels, they were there. You go to Australia again to get 2 more hostile vessels, and then you bring in all these vessels. Just now we're going to have more vessels and sailors. It shows the stupidity of this government. And again, as I said, you have to utilize your resources in an effective manner. The preventative maintenance is similar to what's taking place with the police service. People would have seen the biggest criticism I had as commissioner and minister were too many vehicles, too many blue lights, too many sirens, because I did a comprehensive preventative maintenance system. Then you have this excuse for a prime minister when I opened the Carona station say, I don't know why Gary Griffith as commissioner said that they want SUVs for the police service. No, he want the police to go in a B13 Central or sedan to go up in hills, and then after the vehicles cannot take that kind of licks because police vehicles you're driving 24 hours a day compared to the average citizen who will use their car for 2 hours a day. So which means that a police vehicle their lifespan is almost 10 times less than the average citizen's vehicle. So all of those things is because of lack of understanding, lack of preventative maintenance, and that is what has happened with the Coast Guard. No fault of the sailors, no fault of the Defence Force. It is because of the incompetence of the administration. So 14 months is not going to make a difference because, as I said, you don't have the manpower in the Coast Guard to equate with the naval asset acquisition.
Okay. And just finally here, there was a little controversy that I'm trying to get to the bottom of. This was the initial discussion with us yesterday, and you were saying it's the most ridiculous law. The lady that was arrested for the bandana, the camouflage bandana, Fitzgerald Hines as National Security Minister is saying one thing as it relates to the camouflage law, then Customs saying another thing as it relates to the law. I mean, what is the law on the camouflage?
So, and again, it shows these people call themselves attorneys, all of them, and so many of them call themselves attorneys. And I know there's bush lawyers. You are Fitzgerald Hines, an attorney, and you didn't understand there are two different laws. That is what is the problem. So when you hear all of the to and fro, so let me clarify. Under the Defense Act, Chapter 1401 of the laws of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, there's a law in the Defense Act that states that you must not wear camouflage in the resemblance of that of the Defense Force. It may seem as an outdated law. Most of the countries in the world do not have such a law. I think there are about 15 odd countries maximum in the world that have such a law. Most of them are the Caribbean countries, St. Lucia, I think Barbados, and so forth. And there can be some justification to it because if you have a full Defense Force uniform, it can be seen that you can imitate a member of the Defense Force to be involved in illegal activity. So there's some small degree of justification to that. What happened is that in 1984, some bright idea person, which is something I intend to change as well, customs comes under the Ministry of Finance. Stupid law, stupid, and because of that, it means that the customs officers do not report to the Ministry of National Security, even though customs has a big part to play to interact with the Ministry of National Security. But some clowns said, well, customs makes a lot of money, so let's put them under finance. So maybe if one day if Coast Guard starts seizing lots of contraband, alcohol or whatever, they might put Coast Guard under the Ministry of Finance. It's that stupid. So because Fitzgerald Hines is not part of the Ministry of Finance, he did not understand and know that law. That law is a customs regulation, which I've always said is the dumbest law ever made, ever in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. Because the law says that any pattern, material involving camouflage is illegal. Laws are not made to deliberately infringe on your rights. Laws are made to make sure that there is order. Laws are made to ensure that there is some degree of national security, and you put that to protect you. How could a lady with a pink short camouflage pants be a threat to national security? A child with a blue camouflage toy be a threat to national security? So poor customs, they will bombard me when I was minister and commissioner. So this is pressure. Tourists are coming and saying this has to be a banana republic. So because I have a blue camouflage wallet, you're going to seize my wallet. Because my child has a yellow camouflage umbrella, you're going to seize it. These things are ridiculous. As a minister, I drafted it. I prepared it. I was sent to cabinet, and unfortunately, I left office, and it never went forward. The same thing I did as Commissioner of Police. I wrote to the Attorney General. I said, this is causing a serious problem and it's affecting our law enforcement officers in confrontation on a regular basis. So Fitzgerald Hines was wrong. He misled the country because of his ignorance and not understanding the law. So there are two laws. All that is required is to repeal that law in customs. And I spoke to the head of customs when I was minister. He agreed. With anybody who enters the airport, you'll be seeing it. A pink camouflage bag is illegal. How is that? Why is that illegal? What is the crime? How is that? By you seizing that, how is that going to make the country safer? How is that going to assist national security? So what is required is to repeal that law and stick to the law of the Defense Act solely in the resemblance of that of the Defense Force. That is all that is required. I wrote to the Attorney General, this is a very lazy government. All it takes is for them to go to Parliament and to remove that, because this is a regulation, in fact. It's not even something heavy in the Constitution. Customs piggybacked on the Defense Act and they misinterpreted it, whoever was in 1984. That is what is required.
Wow. All right, well, the other time, but thanks a lot for your time, and, all the best this weekend.
Yeah, we need it. All the best.
Thanks a lot, yeah. All right, so that is political leader of the NTA, Gary Griffith.